Andy, I think it's showtime. I think we're
Nicholas, my
live.
friend, good to see you. Good to
Yeah,
see
good to
you.
see you too. Thanks for joining us today on Parents of Preemies Day.
It's
Now,
a
I imagine most people might suspect that you're actually a parent of a preemie like me, but your story is a little bit unique and a little bit different than many of our guests that we're talking to today. So first, I want to, for those that are not aware, Andy recently joined the board here at Graham's Foundation. So we're incredibly grateful for you and for joining the board. And I think after we talk here for 15, 20 minutes or so, I think people will understand exactly why uh, I invited you and you were kind enough to accept the invitation. So,
yeah. Thanks, Nick.
yeah, absolutely. So, Andy, maybe if you could, so you're the publisher of a book called Go Preemies, which is all about inspirational stories of people that many people know well, that, however, they probably didn't know that they were born premature. So what was that?
Yeah,
What was the inspiration behind? This is not. This is a little bit of a niche. This is a niche subject, right?
this is a niche within a niche. Uh,
Yeah.
and first off, Nick, I really want to thank you for inviting me to join today. Graham's Foundation has been a wonderful organization to be affiliated with and really friends with for a number of years now. And I think you're right in terms of how you started off the conversation. I'm hopeful that I can bring a little bit of a unique perspective today relative to all your other guests. Uh,
Absolutely.
I am a now 45-year-old adult.
40, 45.
45.
Oh my! I wouldn't have guessed a day over 35.
Thank you, sir.
Man, taking good care of yourself.
Yeah, a 45-year-old adult preemie, and
Wow.
I've been actively involved in the community for decades now.
Yeah.
Initially as a research participant after my years as a young preemie, and a lot of research, and then developing Go Preemies and participating with organizations like yourself. And like you said, I'm very happy to have recently joined the Graham's board. So,
Maybe
um,
if you could, if we could go to the next slide. I think it'd be interesting to share a bit about your story because candidly, oftentimes I will meet people and they'll say, "Oh, yeah, I had a granddaughter that was born early, or and they were a 22 weeker or 21, back in 1947." I'm like,
right,
yeah, somebody didn't do the math right because that was impossible, right? And I recognize that stories over time, the details get fuzzy. But if most people, if they told me that they were a 27 weeker in the 1970s, I would have been, frankly, the survival rate was, as I understand it, was pretty slim because there were some breakthrough drugs, one being surfactant, that
surfactant. Yep.
assisted in the enabling lungs that were not, mature to be able to develop without a lot of the scarring that the early machines, frankly, did. So I'm curious, was there something in particular, on here on the slide, Rainbow Babies and Children's, which for those of you that don't know is in Cleveland, Ohio. Was there anything in particular that perhaps they were trying or that they were experimenting with at that point in time that was critical,
Yeah,
from what you've been told, because
yeah,
obviously you were there, but you probably don't
right.
remember the details.
I would say, Nick, if I hadn't been born in Cleveland or say two other cities at that point in time in 1977, I would not have survived. So I was very fortunate to be born here in Cleveland, Ohio, and have the world class University Hospitals, Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in our backyard. And at the time, they were at the forefront in driving innovation in neonatology.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, surfactant had just become available, and neonatologists who would go on to become world leaders in their field happened to be at Rainbow at that time. And so, um, again, it was fortunate timing on my behalf. And for those who can see the slide, For some of you, those strange things are actual Polaroid pictures. Those
I can tell. You can
yeah,
tell.
you could
Yeah,
tell. So those are
absolutely.
Polaroid snapshots from 1977, and I'm sure that the isolettes look different than the one there in the middle. Yes, at the time I was born at 27 weeks, which this was at the time when kind of the term miracle baby, first came up. And
Yeah.
I was
Yep.
fortunate enough when I was in high school, I did an internship with my neonatologist. I spent 3 weeks at Rainbow and kind of studied our cohort and learned all about that process. And I'm very fortunate that many of the other preemies in my cohort either did not survive or
Mm.
had significant complications, and that learning experience, put
Yeah.
a real sense of thankfulness and a desire to contribute back to the community.
Yeah, I think, Andy, one thing you point out too is that I know from the history of neonatology in the early days, a lot of the focus was strictly on survival. If the baby survived and left the NICU, that was considered a win,
Right.
right? It was all about survival, and there was maybe less of a focus, less of an awareness on the morbidities, right? On the impact of, hearing, sight, physical, brain development,
Right.
right? And as we've seen over the years, survival rates continue to get better and better and better. And what parents like myself are hoping for is that the morbidities, i.e., the side effects of that experience of being born prematurely, there's nothing better than being in the womb full term, no doubt about it. But when that's not possible, and
Yeah.
that baby is born prematurely, survival, and then obviously we all want outstanding outcomes. The neonatologists certainly do as well, and they continue to get better and better and better. I was born with a heart condition, and when I was 30 some years ago, I had open heart surgery. There were 2 places in the country to have my particular procedure. Now they do ablations like what I had all over the
Right.
country, right? So I know what it's like to be now. You didn't, again, your parents didn't have a choice. They happened to, fortunately, they were in a location, right? I'd love to have your folks on for a future Parents Preemies Day and hear from them. I can imagine there weren't concepts like family-centered care, or and just
Yeah.
and when can you hold? I mean, I'm seeing your mom and your dad holding you, and that's a month after you were born, right? So it'd be interesting to kind of hear what it was like for them, right? I imagine it was
Yeah. And to
quite.
that point, Nick, and I think what's important and where I'm really happy to see organizations like Graham's Foundation and others, I don't want to say fill a void, but at this point in time, there really was very little support for parents.
Yeah.
My mom, you've met my mother before, and
Yeah.
she'll share stories with you that it's a it can be a very isolating and challenging experience. It's hard to find
Yeah.
people to identify with.
Yeah.
Particularly at that time, it can be hard. Not that, I mean, the medical professionals are wonderful. It's their day job. It can be
Yeah.
challenging to find people to empathize with, and so
Yeah.
it's great to have organizations like Grant help fill that need for parents.
Yeah. And I think, the prematurity rates for a whole host of different reasons are um, kind of stable, I guess, from a percentage perspective, and their ability to intervene at the early moments of a premature birth. They get better, they get smarter, they understand how important what they do in the first minutes and hours is on the outcomes. And so it's great that survival rates continue to improve. And frankly, what I know that means for organizations like Graham's Foundation is the need is going to continue to be there
Yes.
and probably grow, but grow for a good reason, because more of the babies are surviving, right?
Right.
And we also know that regardless of what kind of technology we have, like we have right now, that we're
Right.
like what we're doing right at this very moment, it still can be an incredibly isolating experience for
Yes.
those parents. So
Right.
I want to get to, part of Parents of Preemie's Day, when I came up with the idea, it was acknowledging those early Mother's and Father's Days can be a bit surreal for parents when they first bring in their baby home, or maybe they're in the NICU on Mother's or Father's Day and they don't maybe necessarily feel like a parent. Hopefully over time, as folks follow Graham's Foundation on social media, you'll see that we provide an opportunity for parents to share, frankly, to brag about their
Yes.
preemies, right? I think that's important because, we, as I know, um, you celebrate when you have a baby that's born early, and you are grateful that they're frankly alive.
Mhm.
Your expectations are lower, and your hope, right? You're just hopeful, right? And so I think it's inspiring to see the kind of stories that you talk about in the book, in the Go Preemie's book. So incredibly inspiring for parents, because so many of them probably have no idea that the people that you feature in your book
Yes.
were born 2-3 months premature, it is significant. So maybe we could go on to the next slide.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we um,
It,
so just maybe just kind of, just share a little bit more about sort of the inspiration, and how the idea came about for the Go Preemies book.
Yeah, I would say really 2 points, Nick. They both echo what you've said on earlier points. One, and I'll share this as an anecdote. When we think about community and the community of prematurity, thinking back on my own experience, it wasn't until I would say 20 years, in my young 20s, until we finally had the opportunity to meet other families who had
Hmm.
gone through a similar experience.
Wow.
And that just happened to be coincidental through something that Rainbow was doing. Up until that point, it was really only conversations that we had within the family,
Hmm.
and stories my mother and father would tell.
Hmm.
There was no one else to talk to, and
Wow.
it would have been so nice to have had someone or another family who'd gone through similar experiences just to talk to and compare notes to.
Yeah.
And just the technology wasn't there, the community wasn't there. So I'm hopeful with the work that you're doing and others are doing, that people don't have to wait 20 years.
Yeah.
But still, the desire to have a community and the desire to talk and meet with other people who you can identify with is powerful. And
Hmm.
that gets to the point in terms of why creating the book. Back to your earlier point on morbidities. When I studied my own cohort with my neonatologist, I would say most of those preemies, um, suffered cerebral palsy, blindness, deafness, uh, passed away during
Yeah.
the process. And many of us had learning challenges and developmental challenges,
Yeah.
which I had myself. So learning delays. So I was held back a year in school, and those things. Again, if you don't have someone to talk to, you don't have someone to identify with.
Hmm.
It can be challenging. Just to process yourself. And so I just in doing some research, I started to see patterns in terms of the some successful people who were preemies, and I thought to myself, man, if I had known, when I was 7, 8, 9 years old,
Yeah.
and going through some developmental challenges at school,
Yeah.
that I could look to certain people and say, wow, they had gone through similar struggles. My 8-year-old self would have loved to have had
Hmm.
these stories. And so
Hmm.
I created the book knowing that one, preemies have a lot of character and going through that, from birth, we do have this fighter's mentality. I think that when as you grow older, you look for unique things to differentiate yourself.
Yep.
Ability to use the character building experiences,
Yeah.
perseverance, and again, the community. These are things I wanted to highlight in the book.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, I was writing for my 7, 8-year-old self, knowing
Yeah.
there'd be other preemies who would benefit.
Yeah. Absolutely. Maybe go on to the next slide, Nicole. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Andy. It's you know, as you're talking about some of the different, the some of the different morbidities that uh, preemies can face, and it's that balance of wanting to be you as you're developing, and I know, like in my own daughter's experience, you're aware of, you don't want others to uh, well, you want them to treat you as a full human, as a full
Right.
self, right?
Right.
So, and so there is that balance, but also, you know, being aware of, because it's not a lot of the morbidities. It's not obvious. You can't look at
Right.
someone. No one could have looked at me and knew I had a heart condition growing up as a kid. It wasn't,
Right.
there wasn't anything necessarily inherently obvious, but it has an impact. And so, having this kind of inspiration. So, and my gosh, tell me about the caricatures as well are amazing. And so, and the caricature, I forget what's the proper term. You guys illustrator, sorry, came over to Appearance of Preemie's Day, if you remember.
Yes.
I think 2015.
Yes.
Right, and it was amazing to have you guys there and all that, and doing the characters for the kids. But maybe you could share a little bit about some of the stories here.
Yeah, I'm really proud about this page. One, not only because of the roster here in terms of world-class individuals, but also how these illustrations came together. So, just looking at the top, right, Winston Churchill, who's one of the most important world leaders of all time. Mark Twain, the father of American literature, 2 months premature. For those with young ladies who are young preemies, Anna Pavlova is the most famous ballerina of all time. She is the Michael Jordan, if you will, of ballerinas, the Tiger Woods of ballerinas. And she was born in Russia 2 months premature. A phenomenal story, right? She was a world traveler who brought ballet to the world.
Yeah.
She was 2 months premature. Albert Einstein needs no introduction, right?
Heard of that guy. Yep.
A unique character. Yeah, you've heard of him. Charles Darwin also, right, needs no introduction in terms of his contributions to science.
Yeah.
Again, on the athletic side and on the female athlete side, Wilma Rudolph was a groundbreaking multi-gold medalist Olympian who had multiple comorbidities from her premature birth, and a very inspirational story that we get into in the book. Isaac Newton needs no introduction, right? 3 months premature centuries ago, right?
Yeah.
His story is harrowing in terms of how he survived and what he was able to contribute. Sidney Poitier, may he rest in peace, recently passed away.
Yeah.
A world-leading humanitarian and actor as well. Pablo Picasso, who, for those with, creative leaning.
Yes.
I consider myself being one.
Yes.
Needs no introduction. And lastly, if you ask most in the preemie community who they know, who is a preemie, they most people would say Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, and he was born at a time where they didn't understand regulating oxygen.
Exactly.
So he is blind as a lot of preemies that were born during his time, because it was just like, we're going to keep it at 100% oxygen.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, if we do that, the blood vessels and the ROP, right? So, that's again, so that's
I saw all these stories. Doing research, and I get back to my 8-year-old self. I said, I would have loved nothing more than to have been in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and had something where I can say, hey, these people were like me. They overcame challenges.
Yeah.
And I want to do the same. So what I did, Nick, I went out to I said, I want to create a book that tells a story. And so I wrote the book, and I did some very rough illustrations myself, but I am not a world-class illustrator. So I used a service, and I must have had 100+ illustrators submit their proposals to want to illustrate the book. And it got down to 3 finalists. And then I thought to myself, well, wait a second. My old buddy, my old friend Jamie Rockwell, who I grew up with in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, who is a professional illustrator, I said, you know what? I'm going to go to Jamie too. He really might want to do this job. So I told him about it. I said, hey, I've got 3 other proposals that are great, but if it's of interest to you, let me know. He gave me the illustration that you're looking at of Winston Churchill. And I said, you're it, my man. We're going to put it together. And the book took months to put together. And this is my favorite part, is we were about halfway through, and we're going through edits and doing things. And he calls me Mail. He said, Mail, you're never going to believe this. I was at my mom's house, and I was showing her. She asked me what was going on for work and what I was working on. I said, I'm working on this really interesting project with Andy Mail about prematurity, and we're putting this book together to tell the inspirational stories of the world's most famous preemies. And I didn't know much about it, but I think it's really cool, and I'm having a great time. And she said, Jamie, have a seat. She said, I need to tell you something I've never told you before. You yourself were born, I believe it's, I think he was 2 months premature, or month and a half premature. He didn't know.
No.
He was born in 1979. And
wow.
His mom had chosen to, not share with him at the time.
Yeah.
So he learned during this process that he himself was a preemie. And so we just figured that seals the deal. And
wow. Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. And I can I understand that. I appreciate parents take different approaches.
Yep.
Right. And every, and I understand. So, I understand. So the question is, there's room for 10. You need to be able to scoot it over so we can have Andy Mail, character of Andy Mail up there. And I'm sure there are a lot of parents that would love. I'm sure you've gotten a few requests of how can I customize my Preemie's book so I can add my kid in there, right? So
we met a couple folks at your Parents of Preemies Day a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to have their own page one day. So
I know. I find that, you have a number of creatives and artists, and I do find, my daughter is particularly strong in the creative and in the arts and the expression. I don't know, that's just observation. Don't, haven't seen any big study against that, but
I would agree with it anecdotally though.
Yeah. And I don't know if there may be some reasons medically that it makes sense, but anyhow, is there another? I can't remember. Yeah, there's a little. I mean, this just kind of there's a little bit more of the
book looks like. So on the left there's a main character page, and on the right hand side of each page it tells a story. And so the idea is to have initially parents read the book, and what we find is parents read the book. Actually, we get a lot of books sent to NICUs.
Yep.
Because a lot of parents who are in the NICU, they don't have, they'll read their kids' Harry Potter series.
Sure. Yeah.
All these things. So they read the book to their preemie in the NICU, but then I think more importantly, when the young preemies are growing up and at reading age, the preemies start to read the stories themselves.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, and you can tell, for those of you that are joining us, you can tell just how well done it is. So it can certainly be an inspiration for us as parents, and then obviously an inspiration for those preemies as well. Well, Andy, there's after you have a baby born prematurely, if you start to do research, you start to understand some of the statistics, right? Some of the outcomes, and no question about it. One of the things that I learned is that if you are a male, not just last name, but if if your gender is a male and you are a white male, you have the toughest odds, right? Our lungs develop the slowest, and for a whole host of reasons, we have the toughest odds when it comes to come out of that neonatal intensive care unit. So you truly are a miracle, and I'm sure your parents remind you of that all the time. And we're obviously incredibly grateful that you are you and doing the amazing work that you're doing in the world. And we're grateful that you are contributing some of your experiences and your talents to Graham's Foundation. So we're all the better for it as well.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with that, Nicole, I know you're in the background. I wasn't paying any attention to any of the comments, so I don't know if there were any particular questions that came up. You let me know if there are any questions that you think need to be addressed. I love this book. I like it.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So. Yeah. White boy syndrome. Yeah. Great. Awesome. Adding to the shopping list. Beautiful. Well, I think that's good. I think we're ready to wrap. Again, Andy, thanks for your time today, and give your parents a big thank you as well. Let them know. I'm gonna want to have them on for a future Parents of Preemies Day and get their story as well. So
I will be seeing my mother later today, and she will say very fondly how much she loves Graham's Foundation and you and what you guys are doing. So
thanks.
Again, thank you so much for the invitation. Hope everyone has a great Parents of Preemie Day, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
I was muted. I say, okay, we're out. And he left. I'm like, no. Okay. Well, thanks, Andy.
Are we still live?
Nope, we're done. The moment he said bye and I saw him, I was like, hopefully to catch him, I ended the broadcast because you said thank you.
It's interesting. The end broadcast is still an option up on my screen.
Oh, and look at that. It didn't